Welcome to the Green Team Lunch and Learn Leadership Inspired by Nature. My name is Catherine Cooper and I'm going to be the host for our session today. I just wanted to remind everybody about what the Sustainability Learning Center is. We are a learning and networking hub for sustainability. We do professional development and skill certification around green core competencies within all sectors, really. We provide instructor-led training and around sustainable strategy development, green team gap assessment, employee engagement for sustainability, and a number of other areas. We do that customized face-to-face, customized online, as well as online programs. And we do this series of lunch and learn programs for green teams because we're really hoping that over time we can create a bit of a network for green teams so that you can help one another as you work through this process of implementing sustainability. We also do skills certification, and we're working with a number of groups right now, the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, the Natural Step, to find a way to create one certification process for people within specifically Canada, so that will be a model for other countries as well. And we also have e-learning platform. Sustainability 101 is an award-winning program based on the Natural Step. And then we also have Green Education Online, where there's 50 different modules, everything from energy, water, waste, sustainability strategy, green purchasing, and whatnot. And then finally, if you haven't had a chance to visit it, we do have the Sustainability Learning Network, which is on our website. Just go to the upper right-hand corner and click log in, and you can create a free, this is all free, profile, and go in there and you will find free webinars and an opportunity to dialogue with one another as well. And so with that little commercial moment out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to Denise DeLuca. And I'm just looking for you, Denise, so we can we're really pleased to have Denise with us. She's just returned from the UK, and so she's kind of fresh back into Seattle. She's the founder and director of BCI, Biomimicry for Creative Innovation. And Denise's career has spanned both the public and private sectors and included running her own sustainable resource consulting business called Emergence Solutions. She has been the former outreach director for the Biomimicry Institute, which many people may be familiar with. And she's presented numerous lectures and workshops, helped to expand the tools and concepts of biomimicry, and worked to integrate biomimicry into university-level education. She was also the former project lead for Sweden's Biometrics 3000, and has recently returned to Seattle from the UK, where she continues to do her work with BCI. So thank you very much, Denise, for coming, and we're looking forward to your presentation today.
As Catherine said, we're going to be talking about leadership inspired by nature, leading into an era of sustainability. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a real heartfelt thanks to each of you for taking the time to learn about leadership inspired by nature. I feel so strongly that we need new kinds of leaders in the world of sustainability, and very much appreciate that you've chosen to take on that responsibility. So I just want to truly thank you for that. So in the next hour, we're going to frame why natural leadership is needed by companies now and into the future, explain the concept of ecological thinking for radical transformation, discuss what we can learn from leadership models found in nature and which models work best in different situations. We'll talk about how leaders can use nature's principles to create a business inspired by nature. And then we'll break there for a few questions, and then we'll go on and talk about some activities that you can apply right away to your leadership work to help your organization become a business inspired by nature. Before we dive in, I just want to warn you that I recently taught this as a 10-week course as part of a master's program. So I'm trying to cram 90 hours worth of work into our precious 1 hour together. So I'm going to try and go very quickly, and then, like I said, we'll pause for questions before we get into the activities. So why do we need natural leadership or leadership inspired by nature? You know, if you're taking this this webinar, I think you all probably intuit the answer to this question. As you all know, and I'm guessing many of you have spoken about and written about yourself, this, the Earth, is all that we have to work with. All of us, humans and the rest of the organisms in nature, have to learn to survive and thrive within the constraints of the Earth, or we will go extinct. It's really as simple as that, and the constraints are also pretty well known. All the other species of nature with small brains or even no brains at all have created immeasurable diversity of successful solutions and strategies and systems that are incredibly efficient and elegant and that have survived for almost 4 billion years. Humans, on the other hand, with our very large brains and capacity for advanced thinking, our machines and our factories, our computers and our communication systems, our plans and our programs have come up with some very clever inventions and business models and economic systems and governments and other organizations, but we're proving ourselves to be unsustainable. For example, I'm guessing all of you have heard of peak oil, but I am shocked by how many people have not. And I'm even more shocked that the great majority of our leaders have no plans at all to deal with peak oil, with the rapid price spikes or extended flow stoppages that go with that. Keeping in mind that our food systems are completely dependent on oil too, so no oil means no food. And of course, peak oil isn't the only resource limit that we're approaching. Compounding all that, our conventional leadership models are unable to handle radical, volatile, and unpredictable change. In addition to volatility and disturbances caused by resource limitations, there are positive yet equally radical transformations caused by rapidly emerging technologies. Mobile phones, laptops, digital cameras, the web, email, Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Flickr, you guys all know that list. These technologies have given people, incredible capacity for power that is only just beginning to be released. We're seeing a shift from corporate to consumer, from broadcast to broadband, from networks to networked. Again, conventional leadership models are largely incapable of responding to these sorts of transformations and the impacts, positive and negative, that they have on our society, on our communities, on the people and organizations that they lead. Conventional leadership was born from an older time when resources appeared to be abundant, when we were less concerned about human rights, when technology was simpler and communications were controllable. Conventional leaders strive to make their organizations independent, competitive, controlled, stable, protected, maximizing or minimizing, and focused on return on investment. Seeking to achieve these characteristics has served leaders well for the past 50 or 150 years. Gosh, 500 years. But we all know that they've done a great disservice to the environment and to human rights. They've also done a great disservice to us, the workforce. The demoralizing, dehumanizing, soul-sucking culture of conventional business is so painfully familiar to most people that we find great solace in shows like The Office and cartoons like Billboard. No one deserves this kind of work life, not you, not the people in the organizations that you lead. We've been led to believe that our leaders have created great pillars of industry, but in reality, they've created castles made of sand. The decade that we have now entered, from 2010 to 2020, has been dubbed in the media as the decade of fear, the decade of volatility, the decade of transparency, the decade of creative destruction, and the decade of transformation. Whatever it's called, the message is clear. Change is happening, it's volatile, it will be transformative, and conventional leadership models are unfit to handle it, unfit to lead us into an era of sustainability. What I believe we need now, and into an era of sustainability, is what we're calling natural leadership, or leadership inspired by nature. So we all know that nature is, of course, sustainable, and nature defines sustainability. So if we want to drive sustainability, be sustainable, lead ourselves into an era of sustainability, we must realign ourselves with nature, rejoin the positive, virtuous cycles of nature. We must let go of the ways of the past, let go of conventional assumptions, let go of conventional business or leadership models, and become leaders inspired by nature. Natural leaders recognize, embrace, and leverage resource limitations, emerging technologies, and rapid change and volatility. Natural leaders are driven by ecological thinking. They learn from successful leadership models of nature, are grounded in nature's principles, and even use tools that also can be learned from nature. Some of you may have saw that I'm with BCI and may have checked out our website, and our byline for BCI is ecological thinking, radical transformation. Based on what we've talked about just in the past few minutes, maybe you're getting a sense of what we mean by that, but we'll go over that now. We've already said that radical change, both good and bad, has happening, is happening, and will continue to happen on numerous fronts into the foreseeable future. In addition to resource limitations and rapidly emerging technologies, we've got climate change, political upheavals, economic instability. We cannot deal with all these radical changes by making numerous incremental changes to conventional approaches. It's just not enough. To deal with the radical changes we're facing, and more importantly, to deal with the radical changes that we need to make in order to achieve an era of sustainability, we need nothing less than radical transformation. Most leaders don't get this, and conventional business models simply don't allow it. So that's what we mean by radical transformation. So what about the ecological thinking part? You've all heard of systems thinking, right? And we all know that we're somehow supposed to be applying systems thinking to everything we do, that no matter how smart you are, and I know you're all smart, most of us have a really hard time getting our heads around systems. We're just not really wired to do that, especially when we're supposed to be thinking about dynamic systems and systems of systems. The conventional approach, and the approach taken by conventional leaders, is to pretend that our systems are limited, static, or steady state, and controllable. And this actually used to be a pretty fairly effective approach when communication technologies were limited and when things happened more slowly and predictably, and when many resources appeared to be abundant. You know, a really typical example that you might be familiar with is supply chains. Let's say that run from raw materials to manufacturing, transportation, sales, and finally the consumer. So if it goes beyond that, it goes into waste management. Now, in this linear chain approach, the only interaction the consumer has with the whole chain is with the last link, with the retailer. If you apply systems thinking, that supply chain would turn into a value-creating network where all participants are interconnected and can share freely back and forth. This systems approach allows the sharing of ideas, co-creativity, adaptability, and resilience, and the radical new thinking that we're talking about. And we're beginning to see this where, for example, companies are appealing directly to consumers for new ideas and solutions and open sourcing. So we're beginning to see that transformation occurring. So how do we really get our heads around systems thinking? Well, luckily, help can be found in our own backyard. Nature is composed of systems, dynamic systems, systems and systems at every scale and time and space. That's what ecosystems are made of, and that's how they work. So if you can go in nature and observe and understand how and why ecosystems work in a natural setting, you can apply what you learn to your organizations to create sustainable, dynamic, resilient, adaptable systems. And this is actually easier than you think, because you as an organism and we as species are part of nature and part of numerous systems in nature. We have evolved to act as participants in numerous complex networks of ecosystems in nature. So even though it's hard to get our head around it from, say, a mathematical standpoint, ecological thinking is hardwired into our DNA. You already get it. You simply need to remember. Okay, now let's move on to leadership models we can find in nature. Our assumptions in our language around leadership is usually associated with military and sports, right? But if you think about it, it's also full of references to nature, although sometimes those references aren't quite correct or complete. For example, we've all heard or used the expressions pecking order, dog eat dog, leader of the pack, or king of the jungle. Now, those things exist, sort of, but this sort of language implies that nature is dominated by a top-down leadership style based on competition, constantly striving to increase your ranking within the group at the expense of others, and always fighting for the lead position. But if you think about it, fighting is really expensive and generates losers within the group as well as winners. Successful species cannot afford to waste limited energy and resources constantly looking for a fight. So top-down leadership models certainly do exist in nature, but there's a whole range of other models out there too. And even more interesting is that within a given group, you can find many different leadership models, either all at the same time or over time, adapting to each situation at hand. So let's look at some different leadership models that we can find in nature. Today we'll talk about 4 of them. We'll talk about hierarchies, heterarchies, swarms, and what I'm calling roots and shoots. The first one we'll look at is hierarchies. This is the top-down model of leadership that most of us are familiar with and that what most of our organizations follow. So in hierarchies, there's always one dominant leader that everyone is supposed to follow. There's also a top-down leadership structure within the rest of the group. In hierarchies in nature, leadership is constantly tested and reinforced to be sure that the most appropriate or fit member is leading and that the others follow that leader. In wolf packs, for example, there's constant interaction among the members of the pack to help maintain optimal leadership sequence at all times for the benefit of the group, whatever the situation. If the current leader becomes unfit for purpose for any reason, it will be rapidly revealed and he'll be replaced by a more appropriate leader. But however, what appears to be violent behavior or fighting or that competition we were talking about within the pack is often theatrical. So teeth are bared but don't bite. Submissive positions are assumed, not forced. So how does hierarchical leadership work in nature? Well, it works when groups must act decisively and rapidly as a coordinated group in situations where not all members can have full and timely access to information, and when sticking to a preset plan is not possible. So imagine this wolf pack hunting as a pack. However, as I said, even in groups like wolf packs that appear to operate as hierarchies, they don't function that way all the time. When top-down leadership is not needed, members of the pack adopt other leadership models that are more appropriate for the given conditions or situations. So when does hierarchical leadership work best in human systems? The 3 classical examples are the military, emergency response, and sports teams. In each case, action has to be taken rapidly and decisively in response to rapidly changing and unpredictable conditions where not all members have full or timely access to information, yet they need to act as a coordinated group. Okay, so you can see how that would work out in human systems. Top-down hierarchies also have the capacity potentially to create rapid change throughout an organization. So when a leader at the top wants something to happen, he or she may have the power to make it happen relatively quickly. So why aren't hierarchies appropriate in all situations? Hierarchies don't leverage or optimize the full capacity, the full richness, the uniqueness of each and every individual in the organization. People in the organization fit in more as roles. Hierarchies control flows of information and resources, thus inhibit cross-pollination, flow responsivity, and particularly at the local level. Hierarchies also tend to stifle new ideas, creativity, and innovative thinking that could emerge from a diversity of individuals interacting with an organization. Okay, we've all seen geese and other birds flying in the V formation. This is an example of heterarchy. Clearly there's a leader, that one goose that sits up front, but in this case the geese take turns being the leader. In a heterarchy, there's always one leader, but no one individual is capable of effectively leading all the time. So different members of the group take turns being the leader, so that an appropriate individual is leading at all times under the given circumstances. In the V formation, for example, the one out front is doing more work than everyone else. So eventually they're going to need a rest, and someone else is going to have to take the lead. Also, during long migrations, no one goose knows the whole journey. And of course, the lead goose has to know the way. So when the lead goose doesn't know where they're going anymore, they step back and someone who does takes the lead. So the idea in a hierarchy is that at any given time, the goose with the needed knowledge and strength takes on the leadership position. And no one goose has all the needed knowledge and strength to lead the entire journey. It's important to note that hierarchies are not about fairness or equality or giving everyone a chance. With geese, for example, only a subset of the flock take turns being the leader, and some geese are never the leader. So when are hierarchies applicable in our organizations? Well, we all recognize that the projects that we work on go through many different stages. Let's just say conceptualization, ideation, design, implementation, marketing, etc. And that no one person has sufficient breadth and depth of skills to optimally lead each stage. Yet among your team, you're likely to have individuals that are ideal to lead each stage. So some people may be suited to lead more than one stage, and others may not be suited to lead any of the stages. So hierarchies work well when different leadership skills or styles are needed at different times within a project or different places within an organization. Note that you can have hierarchies within hierarchies. In our project example, one person might be leading or overseeing the whole project while allowing different individuals to lead different. Okay, so now let's move on to swarms. Swarms and flocks and schools are examples of organizations in nature that have no leader at all. In a beehive, the queen makes all the babies but doesn't have a leadership role. In this organizational structure, the group is full of feedback loops, which allow each individual and the group as a whole to be agile and responsive, seamlessly functioning as a collective whole. Some of these groups work so well together that they're called superorganisms, meaning the collective intelligence of the swarm or hive makes it function as if it was a single organism. To make swarms work, each individual is highly aware of its surroundings and constantly sensing, receiving, and responding appropriately to information it senses outside the group and with those around them. This leadership structure works well when everyone has the same very clear goals and when everyone always follows a few simple rules that take the form of if this, then that sort of a thing. Swarms actually work in human systems too, where we can trust or assume that everyone will always follow a given set of rules. One example you may have experienced already today is traffic. Since we all agree to follow the very same set of rules, we're able to operate very large machines at relatively high speeds within feet or even inches of one another, and generally assume that we'll get to where we want to go safely. All of that with no leader. They also work when it doesn't matter how something gets from point A to point B, as long as we trust that it will get from point A to point B when and where with the particular characteristics or qualities needed. In our project example with a hierarchy and perhaps a heterarchy, individuals or subgroups can be sent off without a leader to complete specific project tasks on their own any way that suits them best. Swarms work well when there's a strong, clear common goal, when all individuals have to or are naturally inclined to follow all non-negotiable rules, and when how something gets done is not as important as that and when it gets done. So conversely, swarms don't work well when these conditions are not present. For example, in the emergency, military, or sports examples that we were talking about earlier. Swarms are also great for learning about and responding to changes in the environment. They can allow for free flow of communication, information, and resources, and that also allows for faster learning and responsivity. They can allow for creative, innovative thinking by individuals and groups, optimizing the uniqueness of individuals within the framework of the group. Swarms are also nice because they don't have to support the infrastructure required by a leader, and thus it saves resources on that end. Catherine and I were hoping to show you this really gorgeous video, but I didn't embed it properly, and I apologize for that. If you have a chance, check out what's called murmuration. What I wanted to show you is that many of us are really uncomfortable with letting go of control. We're very concerned that individuals cannot coordinate themselves and be productive without strong leadership. But if you want to see how that can work out really beautifully, go ahead and check out this video on your own time. It's called Murmuration, and it's just gorgeous. It's an example of a supreme choreography that can be accomplished in nature without a leader. So the last leadership model in nature that we don't normally think about as leadership, but I think is really relevant to your work as leaders in sustainability, is what I call the roots and shoots model. On the right here, you see lichen growing in a seemingly inhospitable place on a vertical rock surface where it's really cold, that white there is snow. Here, this lichen represents the leader of an entire ecosystem, creating something out of nothing, creating conditions that will allow other life to follow. Lichen can do this through a complete synergy between fungi and algae, together making it possible to live where other organisms cannot. As sustainability leaders, sometimes we have to work between a metaphorical rock and a hard place, in conditions that are not hospitable to sustainable ideas, where you have to create something out of nothing, create conditions that allow the era of sustainability to follow you and then flourish. So imagine emulating the synergy of lichen when you're out there leading your cause, leading sustainability efforts where none yet exist. On the left, you see a coconut seed sprouting. Like the lichen, seeds can also be leaders, leading the life of the new plant, perhaps leading the establishment of its species or even plant life in general in a new location. In most cases, the seed will stay dormant for as long as necessary and is equipped with sensors that signal to sprout only when and where conditions are hospitable. And from the seed emerges the first shoots and roots, the leaders of that particular plant. So how are seeds able to do this? Well, they use a combination of strategies. One is carrying resources within itself so as to be self-sufficient until the roots and shoots can establish and start bringing in resources from the world outside. It also has a protective shell that only opens when conditions are right for germination. As sustainability leaders, you have embedded in your hearts and in your minds the seeds of how things could be. Your ideas about sustainability need to sprout and take root, sometimes when those similar ideas exist and where there is initially no outside support. So think about what you can learn from seeds and roots and shoots about being a sustainability leader. So as we've talked about, you can see that there's a range of different leadership models in nature that we can learn from and emulate, each adapted to be optimal for the individuals, groups, systems, and conditions in which they live. You can also see that nature allows for dynamic combinations of these models, even within a given group, that are constantly adapting to achieve the optimal leadership model in organizational structure for any given situation. Okay, so now we're going to move on to nature's principles. As we've been talking about natural leadership and leadership models in nature, you've been hearing some of the same words over and over again. This is because leadership inspired by nature is grounded in what we call nature's principles. If any of you are familiar with Biomimicry for Design or the Biomimicry Institute, you may have learned about life principles. The BCI has adapted life principles to be more appropriate and more applicable for leadership and organization. And we renamed them nature's principles to be in keeping with our inspired by nature foundation. And they look like this. There are just 6 nature's principles, and like nature itself, all are interdependent and interconnected. And we're just going to touch on them lightly today, but you can look at our website to dig in more later. Being resilient means being able to recover from a disturbance. A business inspired by nature leverages disturbance as an opportunity rather than trying to protect against change. Optimizing is there to be in contrast to the conventional maximizing or minimizing. It means getting formed to function. Being adaptive means constantly sensing and responding to the world around you. Being flexible and continually moving towards positive outcomes. We've already talked about being systems-based, which includes integrating synergies into everything you do. Being values-based is knowing what's truly important to you as a human being, as part of nature, as part of your business, and always acting in accordance with those values. Life supporting is one that you guys already know. It means working as an active and beneficial part of the cycles of nature. A leader inspired by nature is grounded in these principles and applies them to everything he or she does and throughout the organization. Interestingly, following and practicing nature's principles will also help unleash the radical creative thinking that's needed to lead us into the era of sustainability. So what does a leader grounded in nature's principles look like compared to a conventional leader? A leader inspired by nature seeks synergy rather than independence. A leader inspired by nature fosters collaboration rather than strictly competition. A leader inspired by nature leverages collective intelligence rather than forcing top-down decisions. A leader inspired by nature embraces diversity and adaptability rather than trying to resist change. Leadership inspired by nature learns to be open source rather than protected and closed source. Leadership inspired by nature optimizes across the many and across the system rather than maximizing for the few. A leader inspired by nature seeks return on engagement rather than return on investment. A leader inspired by nature thinks and works in dynamic systems rather than in static lineage. A leader inspired by nature creates organizations that form to function rather than expecting people to function within a given rigid preset form. A leader inspired by nature considers the very long term while addressing the very short term. A leader inspired by nature favors emergence over sticking to preset plans. A leader inspired by nature seeks to be effective, not just efficient. Our old leadership and business models are no longer working. As leaders in a sustainable era, leaders inspired by nature, you will need to foster radical new thinking, creativity and co-creativity and cross-pollination, responsivity and adaptability, and a sense of greater purpose and humanity and joy in work. Okay, I'd like to take a quick pause here before we get into the leadership activities inspired by nature and see if we've got any quick questions. I haven't been following the chat very carefully.
That's all right. We haven't had any really skill testing questions at this particular point, but you know, those last slides that you threw at us about collaboration and collective intelligence and being open sourced, and you know, all of that is really quite amazing. So I guess I have a question for you about, and this is Catherine, about emergence versus sticking to plans. And maybe you'll talk about this later with your activities, but can you give an example of something like that, and how we can get companies who are very much bottom line driven and driven by numbers to kind of sit back and look at that sense of emergence?
Yeah, sure. So emergence is the idea that you have a greater vision and greater framework in which you need to work. You know, this is not just wildly open to anything. But instead of coming up with a plan ahead of time and then just going to fix that plan, you start the process in motion and you allow things like collaboration and co-creativity to happen. And so when that happens, what happens is ideas emerge from that group, things that you couldn't have thought of ahead of time. And that's where radical thinking takes place as opposed to incremental thinking. And it's a combination really not of just letting go completely, but it's letting go within a framework. So you do need to get from point A to point B, that's your framework. But you can talk about the characteristics of point B without being completely prescriptive. So it's descriptive instead of prescriptive. It needs to accomplish certain things or be like certain things, but you don't specify out exactly what that is. So what that means is it's really challenging for most of us, especially in a leadership role, to let go at a certain point, let things emerge, reorganize, regroup, and move ahead. So emergence is letting go, allowing co-creativity to happen, new ideas that no one could have thought of before, we couldn't have planned for, and you know, taking those radical ideas forward again. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. It would just be so interesting to see that in action. And it'd be interesting to see if some leaders or managers tend to use that anyway. We just don't, you know, maybe sometimes we see them as disorganized because they're, you know, it's almost like it's the people who are the procrastinators might in fact be emergent leaders. I don't know.
It could be. And another interesting example is, you know how some people are applauded for having, you know, really good plans and methods and programs, and others are applauded because they use their intuition. They just have a knack for something. We use these vague words. Well, I think what those people are actually doing is they're constantly sensing and responding to their environment and kind of letting things emerge within themselves. They don't know ahead of time exactly what they're going to do, but they're able to sense and respond and let new ideas or plans emerge as they go. So they're constantly up to date, being responsive to what's around them, as opposed to, you know, sort of fighting the last battle. They're able to be current and creative on the fly. So I think we see emergence here and there, but we don't call it that.
Well, then let me ask you a question. I mean, is there a, we do a lot of leadership testing within business whereby, we do Myers-Briggs and whatnot, and that helps us to understand people's leadership styles. Have you ever created something that would allow people to sort of see some of these different styles so that we can recognize them as strengths rather than weaknesses? Because in the old model, they would be considered weaknesses.
Well, what we do is, if we had a longer, period of time to talk about leadership, is we do a lot of self-reflection at the beginning to find out, who you are, how you work, what you're like, and some of that could be personality testing. And then you can look at these different models and find out which ones resonate with you, which ones, that you feel aligned with, that animate you, and that work for you. So again, it's not about creating this plan ahead of time, like, oh, I'm going to follow someone else's plan. It's to find out who you are, what your visions are, and letting your leadership style emerge from you within the group and within the framework in which you're working. So it's more, again, less about analysis and more about emergence. And again, we have a really hard time with that because we all want a recipe for, okay, here's what I'm going to do. But then we also realize we have to let go and actually do it the way that works best for us.
I do have a question here from Marilyn, and she's saying she's exploring, I don't know if I'll get this right, Bijan's constructural law put forth in his book Design in Nature, where systems evolve around efficiency of flow. And she's thinking about how this law applies to the nature leadership model.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marilyn. My background is in engineering, and engineering is quite a lot about efficiency. And yet I find that I try to avoid that word because the way that humans use the word efficiency is very single metric. So, for example, how much energy we put in and then how much energy we get out. So that's how we measure efficiency. In nature, we're talking about optimizing and systems thinking. It's efficient in a collective whole, but if you look at individual parts, to a human mind, it would appear incredibly inefficient. So I hesitate to take that out of context from nature, although I completely agree with you, this being, efficiency of flows is important. And if we look back a couple of slides at return on engagement rather than return on investment. Return on investment is more about efficiency model, how much I get out of, of something that I put into. And really what we want to do is engage, get the system, the whole system acting and interacting so you get more flows of resources, of information, of value, of ideas. And that's where we create the greatest value. So a leader can see that system, see those connections can take place, foster the dynamics within the system to allow that co-creativity and emergence to occur. So it's very much patterned on how ecosystems and nature work. So I'm guessing that does, I don't know the specific law that you're talking about, Marilyn, but and I'm sure it's the same sort of thing. But again, I hesitate using that word efficiency because it means something different in nature than it does in the human world. So most of you, I'm guessing, already have extensive knowledge and understanding and passion in the area of sustainability and moving sustainability forward. That's what you do. But when it comes to implementation, I'm guessing that many of you run into one blockade after another when you're working within conventional organizations. I won't ask for a show of hands, but I'm guessing that's the case. Leading sustainability efforts is a big task no matter what, and I certainly don't need to tell you to do that. However, it can be greatly facilitated by introducing and practicing some new skills, activities inspired by nature. So what we've found in BCI and my work also in innovation is that we have all this knowledge, we have all these skills, we have these technologies, but we don't, technical skills, but we don't have the interpersonal skills in order to make these things happen, and that's where I find things get stuck. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm going to talk about a few activities that you can try out right away. And what I'm going to suggest is that you try them first with open-minded, eager, curious people like yourselves before you give them a go with more conventional and challenging situations. Okay, so these activities I'm calling go outside, either by yourself for observation and reflection, or as a group to for inspired discussion. Bring nature into your next meeting, something called yes and, maybe some of you may be familiar with, and also inquiry mind, just an inquiry. Okay, so the first one, going outside. I don't know if any of you have taken other courses in leadership, but if you do or read books in leadership, you'll find that many of them talk about the importance of reflection. It's really important for a leader to take the time to reflect, and based on that reflection, work ahead with intent, not just respond to the world around them, but actually take the time to reflect and then move ahead with intention. Many of us don't take the time to do that. And in this exercise, that's exactly what you do. And it's inspired by nature because you do this personal observation and reflection outside. And how it works is this. It takes about half an hour, and you go outside and you find a quiet spot where you feel safe and you won't be disturbed. And for that 30 minutes, you take the first 10 minutes and you sit there with your eyes closed and your mind open. And I will tell you that is incredibly challenging for most of us to do. If you don't have a watch on, or if you do have a watch on, you'll open your eyes after 1 minute and think it's 10. But you sit there with your eyes closed, mind open. You don't try and think about anything. You don't try and observe anything. You just sit there and you allow the wind to go by. You can smell things. You can feel what's underneath you. If things pop into your mind, distractions from the day, no problem. Some people like to visualize a little box at their side and put that spot in that box to deal with later. So that's your first 10 minutes. Second 10 minutes, you continue to sit there quietly, but you do it with your eyes open. And now you're able to observe with all of your senses, including your eyes, what's going on in the nature around you. You're not trying to learn anything. You're not trying to determine anything, identify anything. Just allow yourself, again, with your mind open to observe. The last 10 minutes is for your reflection. So now you are actually reflecting on something. It could be a topic that you're thinking about at the moment, a challenge you're working on, or you can reflect on things like nature's principles, about the systems you're seeing, about the optimization, the resilience that you're seeing out there, how things are interdependent, interconnected, things like that. So that's all you do. There's different versions of this where you actually focus on a specific thing, you focus on sounds or something like that. But this activity, this 30-minute activity of observation reflection outdoors, is actually quite incredible. We've done this week-long or 10-day immersion courses out in the rainforest, and out of all that, people said this 30-minute observation and reflection time is one of the biggest gifts they've ever given to themselves. So I encourage you to do this and see how that helps your leadership. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is going outside of the group. In this case, as we talked about earlier, we might have all the knowledge and all the passion in order to carry forward with our sustainability ideas and programs, but to have radical change, you need radical different thinking. So we can't have conventional thinking, incremental thinking, and really move as far ahead as we need to. But we need really inspired collaboration and co-creation. So what you do in this situation, you've got your group, you may be working on kind of a topic, you may be trying to decide something. You take your group and you break into pairs. Each pair can take on the entire topic or say a subtopic or challenge, and you send them outside for 15 to 30-minute walks. It's just walking and talking is absolutely fantastic. Just the sheer fact of having your blood flow flowing a little bit more, having the sunshine, or it could be rain on your face or the wind, it's physically stimulating. It stimulates different parts of your brain, and thus it stimulates different conversations. So just that alone is amazing. Also, the idea of walking side by side, shoulder to shoulder, instead of sitting across from each other at a desk, sets up a completely different interpersonal dynamic. So again, that alone will help this pair come up with much more creative ideas than they would otherwise. It's even better if you can observe nature, if these pairs can observe nature while they're walking. So while they're all talking, they stop and they look at the maple tree or the blade of grass, and they kind of ponder, well, what can this maple tree tell us about our problem? So if you can go to a natural area or walk on a natural surface, or go to a greenhouse or a botanical garden, that's absolutely fantastic. Although this would be going outside is great. And as a business fit into, you can also try asking, how does nature address this topic? Which is a very curious way of doing things. Let's say you're trying to set up a communication policy. Well, how does a pine cone handle communication? Well, again, that sets up a whole new chain of thought and thinking, and will inspire this creativity. And because it's off topic from the expertise of the pair, it helps think of radical new thinking, where you get that co-creativity going on and emergent thinking. So after that 15 to 30-minute walk, people come back and they share their ideas and examples. And you'd be amazed at the level of excitement, the level of new ideas we have after just sending people out for a walk. The biggest challenge here, honestly, is getting people to come back. So you do want to make sure that you have people watching them. Okay, an example of how this works. Some of you may have heard of this if you've taken any courses in biomimicry. There's a group called Interface Explore. They're a bit of a poster child for biomimicry. And they did this very thing. They simply went outdoors. They were trying to come up with a radical new idea in carpeting. Of course, carpeting's been pretty much the same for ages. So they took people, they went outdoors, and they simply asked the question, how does nature make floor covering? And what they did is they noticed that as they're walking under trees, the wind came up and it would blow up the leaves, they'd fall back down in a different pattern that was there before. So it was randomized and different, and yet somehow it had the same effect. So they took the idea, and from that one simple observation that probably happened within the first 15 minutes, they noticed things like, well, nature uses tiles. It doesn't have that uniform connected floor covering. And it can take a given leaf or set of leaves, pick them up, turn around, and put them back down again, and it still fits in the same sort of a pattern. So their carpet would be carpet tiles. The child, you can pick them up and put them in different directions. You can take one out and replace it with another random one that's not the same, and they'll still fit in. And they went on and on and on with all kinds of new, more sustainable carpeting ideas based on what they learned by going outside. So that's an example of the kind of radical thinking you can get by going outside. Now, it's not always convenient to go outside. So what you can do is ask people to bring a natural item to your next meeting. Something by natural item, I mean like a pine cone, a flower, it could be from their lunch, an orange, if you run outside and grab a leaf or a piece of grass. It's not something dead like a rock. It's something that either is or was once moving. And what you do is instead of like people introducing themselves as they go around the room, they introduce their items and why they grabbed it. And they say, well, you know, every day when I open the parking lot to the building, I go by that one big old pine tree out there, and I always look at the pine cones. I really like pine cones, so I just decided to grab it. Something as simple as that. So go around and do that. Again, you're setting off a different dynamic. You're not saying, I'm so-and-so, my expertise is such and such, and here's my, you know, the department I work in. That's all that's in the back burner. Instead, you work through your natural artifacts. So when you get to the point in your meeting where you're trying to deal with a challenge of some sort, to come up with a new idea, you simply ask, what can we learn from our natural items in the room about this? And so you say, again, let's say we're coming up with a employee policy or something, and you could say, well, how does this orange do a vacation policy? And at first, we're silent because, well, what the heck does orange have to do with vacation policies? But you'd be amazed to say, well, what does vacation mean? What does the policy mean? What does it want? And all of a sudden, all these wildly radical ideas start to flow. People are excited, and then you start going on looking at the other artifacts. And again, you'd be amazed at how this very simple approach can generate that radical thinking that we need to come up with radical new ideas that we need to move into the era of sustainability. Okay, yes, and is something that maybe you've heard of before. It comes from applied improvisational theater, and that's when actors spontaneously or improvise in order to make a skit. So they're on the stage and they don't know, they have no plans at all. There's a few of them on the stage, and they get a topic and a situation, and they have to create a skit on the spot, keep it moving forward, and end in a certain amount of time. So they have to use all these special skills to do that, and those skills are exactly the ones that we need in order to forward co-creative thinking and moving towards positive outcomes. And curiously, if you don't have time for this, if you dissect them, they're exactly the same strategy that you find in nature. So it's used to enhance co-creative collaboration and keep moving towards positive outcomes. And again, this is really simple. There's one rule for your discussion, and that is that each person must respond to whatever the idea is with the basic format, yes, and. And it takes the form of, yes, what I like about your idea is blah, 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 and we could blah, blah, blah. So let's just look at an example of let's just say, just to keep it simple, your meeting has to do with planning the next company or organizational Christmas party. And you all decided you want to do something different than you usually do. And somebody says, oh, I think we should hold our next Christmas party on a Saturday afternoon at the theme park. Now, if you took a conventional approach, what do you suppose the response to that would be? Now, I don't know about the organizations you work in, but that wouldn't go over very well with people that I know. So you probably have like, oh, come on, you got to be kidding. And the meeting would proceed from there, that people would be things like that, such a horrible idea, and the person saying would just be angry and frustrated, and other people would be would never want to come up with anything different, and you would end up probably doing the same thing that you always did, right? So the conventional approach, when you throw out a different idea, tends to end with bad feelings and no positive outcomes at all. Now, let's try this again with a yes and approach. Same exact suggestion is thrown out, but everyone has agreed to use the yes and rule. So you might say, even though they don't like that idea at all, they'll say, yes, what I like about your idea is that it gets us outside and doing something fun together. And it allows us to include the families that have kids. And someone else might say, oh, what I like about that idea is that we can all dress down and get to know people's families. And we can always go partying informally afterwards. Oh, yes, what I like the idea of doing a fun thing outside that includes kids, maybe even skating or sledding, and maybe we can get babysitters so all of us can go out informally afterwards. So the idea here is you take an initially unacceptable idea or idea that would be cut down, and by honoring some aspect of that idea and adding something to it or taking it in a new direction, keeps things moving in a towards positive outcomes, and it helps co-create collaboration and co-creativity to occur. So it's simply yes and it doesn't have to be quite as rigid as this, but it really helps to be very formal at the beginning. It seems kind of silly, and it's good to start out with a good example in order to practice it. And after a while, as the DCI group will say, oh, well, the yes and to that is blank. We catch ourselves saying no or but or bringing up constraints, and then we force ourselves to say yes and this actually becomes a really fantastic habit. Okay, the next one is just inquiry, and all that means is the only rule here is that you ask questions. Now, in conventional meetings, what we tend to do is come up with answers, or we come up with something to say why it can't work, or come up with an opposing view. In inquiry, the rule is to ask questions. So it helps you to be curious. It sets a respectful tone, and you explore a question or an idea rather than try to answer it. And that allows you to break down the idea and explore it in order to achieve breakthrough. And quickly, how that would work with that same example, exact same thing with the Christmas party idea, same idea that people aren't really fond of, but you say, oh, well, what is it you like about holding it in the afternoon rather than in the evening? Or what is there to do at the theme park? Is the theme park open in the evening? Are there other things we might do in the afternoon? Are there other sorts of places with organized activities that we can consider? You can see with this exploratory inquiry approach that you respect the original concept behind the idea, and you start to allow for other ideas to emerge from each of those. It allows for a whole new range of opportunities as opposed to just knocking down the one that was thrown out there. And if you want to dive into this further, there's more specific forms of this, like Socratic inquiry that you can look into, and then collaborative inquiry. There's actually a whole bunch of those. But this very simple approach of simply asking questions is fantastic. Okay, we're getting to the end of our time here, so I'd just like to quickly wrap up. All right, so today we've talked about the how, why, and what of natural leadership, why radical transformation is crucial to creating the era of sustainability, and why it requires ecological thinking. We've talked about different leadership models in nature that we can learn from and when they're applicable. We've talked about nature's principles as a foundation of leadership inspired by nature and what that looks like compared to conventional leadership. And finally, we've talked about some activities we can try out to introduce and develop skills needed to help make full use of your sustainability knowledge and passion. The message I want to leave with you is this. In order to achieve the era of sustainability, we need leaders to create a radical new vision, an incredibly beautiful and compelling vision of what sustainability means to us. We need leaders that are grounded and nature's principles and that strive to reintegrate our organizations into positive, virtuous cycles of nature. We need leaders that foster radically different ways of interacting, of communicating, of collaborating, and co-creating. We need leaders that create conditions where all of us can fully deploy our creativity, where we are tolerant and empathetic and respectful of each other and the rest of nature. And we can learn how to do all of this from nature, using our own human nature to apply ecological thinking to achieve radical transformation into an era of sustainability. And this is what I believe natural leadership, or leadership inspired by nature, is all about. Okay, I think we've got a little bit of time for questions here.
Well, yeah, I'll just throw it open just for a minute, or if you want to type a question in, it just as we kind of bring this to a close. So thank you very much, Denise. I love that. I love how you finished by talking about, in order to have an era of sustainability, we have to have different ways of leading and being in the world, and that's so fantastic. So if you have any additional questions, I am going to send you Denise's contact information when I send out the email, so you can talk to her directly. I'll also include the link of the birds, that video that we had there. And I think, Denise, you also indicated that you have a document that talks about those exercises, that you could share that as well.
BCI's website, and you can get some other supporting information here. And also, if you would like the activities written up with some simple instructions, just contact me at that email, and I can send them off to you.
And as I say, I will send that out to everyone as well. Just as we're closing, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and thank you for sharing your examples. This was fantastic. I just wanted to remind you of some upcoming things. So we do have our Green Team Gap Assessment Program. So if you've got a team who'd like to really get focused on what it is that you need to tackle next with your Green Team efforts, we have a 51-point checklist and over 4 lunches. We go through these checklists and give you lots of resources and great ideas and take you through that process. And some upcoming programs for you as well. We have a Green Project Management Program, which is online. It meets 4 times, once a week for an hour and a half. We have our Life Cycle Assessment Program. There's a 1-day program for communicators and marketing, and then a 2-day program, and so that's coming up in Toronto. We've got our greenhouse gas measurement and reporting program that's happening online for 1-hour sessions over 4 weeks. And the next Green Team Lunch and Learn is called What is Your Sustainability Score? And it's a group that has been working with the International Society of Sustainability Professionals on their model for looking at how do you determine where you are? How, you're always wondering, how sustainable are we? And they'll give you a model for that and help walk you through that. So that's where we are. And also this recording will be posted on our community, our Sustainability Learning Network, and that will occur as of the next Monday. So this is where you will find it, and we'll help you with that. And then finally, I will be sending you out a survey, so that if you'd be kind enough to respond to that, tell us what kind of topics would be helpful for you in the future as well. And with that, again, thank you so much, again, Denise, for joining us, and for those of you who from around the world who joined us today on this Green Team Lunch and Learn, and look forward to having you come back again. Thanks, Denise.